All right. Good evening and welcome, listeners, wherever you may be today, and welcome to episode 2, season 2 of our Can You Fix Nigeria challenge. My guest today is Mr. Adeola Adeyanju, is the MD of Synod Resources Nigeria, member of the Nigeria Institute of Directors, good speaker, great friend, and always great to chat with. Mr. Adeola, it's good to have you again on the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Kule. It's always a pleasure to do this. This Can You Fix Nigeria series has become one of my favorite things. And the one we did, I think, 2 years ago.
Yes.
It's just gone on radio in Abuja. If people have called me to say, oh, I heard the one you guys did on housing, we liked it, you talked a lot of rubbish, or you talked great stuff. But the key thing is that it's engaging people.
Yes.
For me, that's probably the most important part of this.
Oh.
We're not claiming to have all the solution, but if we get everybody talking constructively, then it's fulfilling the purpose.
Absolutely.
So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again. Tonight, we're going to be speaking on the energy sector with a particular focus on the middle stream and the downstream. And in fact, I think that's exactly where I'm going to pick it up. I wanted you to please let our listeners at home understand what we mean when we say we're talking about the middle stream or the downstream of the energy sector in Nigeria. Can you shed some light on that?
Okay, so as almost everybody in Nigeria now knows, since we're an oil and gas country, essentially, there's always talk of upstream, midstream, downstream. Upstream is where the exploration is done, where we get either crude or gas, as the case may be. For the purpose of government and its agencies, midstream starts from the process where any of those two extracts begin to be broken into its component parts. So if it's gas, you're separating the different types of gas that have come, associated gas and the rest, into usable gas in whatever form that you want to process it into. If it's crude, you're breaking it into the lighter and heavy. What's it called now? It's petrol, it's diesel. I don't want to be saying PMS, AGO, just so that everybody can understand. So things as heavy as your bitumen or fuel oil, which is the heavier kind of fuel. So yeah. Essentially, that's the middle stream or the midstream, as we call it. And then the output from the midstream will then go on and form the downstream. So the downstream bits is essentially the logistics around moving, storage, and then the selling of the products of the constituent products that have been broken into these several parts in the midstream phase. So your petrol has now been extracted in a refinery. The refinery is midstream. And now the process of taking it from that refinery to storage tanks in Apapa or wherever it is, then to filling stations where it is finally sold, all of that is now downstream activity.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry to cut you there. I thought you would.
No, it's okay.
Yes. So you mentioned two things that were very great interest to me there. So you mentioned petroleum or AGO, diesel, and this, and you talked about selling. One of the major issues that are facing Nigerians today, which is a very big topic of discussion, is the subsidy removal. So where are you on the subsidy removal? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Let's start with that.
Adekunle, you're going to cost me some very good friends now. So for a long time, for the longest of time, I was an advocate of subsidy removal. As you know, I was also in the downstream for about 12, 13 years.
Absolutely.
So I was big on subsidy removal. And mainly because it's a lot of inefficiencies. It encourages a lot of inefficiencies in the system. As we have seen, the increment in price seems to have affected our neighbors more than it affected Nigerians.
Yes, absolutely.
So there were a lot of inefficiencies. In the last couple of years, particularly under the last administration, I started to think differently. Not because I thought those inefficiencies had disappeared or otherwise, but there was not a lot that was accruing to the people as benefits of democracy.
Okay.
And I felt that was the only thing that got to the common man. Everything is hijacked. So if you look at Nigeria in its upstream, midstream, and downstream being what gets to the people.
Yeah.
Everything that seems to be hijacked in upstream, whatever made it through upstream, midstream people finish it. And so the subsidy was about the only thing that trickled down to the masses. That was my only reason for wanting to keep. But it became untenable for Nigeria, as we're a broke country at the moment.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that we cannot sustain a subsidy regime. This is the reality. If we had a resource from some of your Middle East countries, we probably would have kept it up. But we're broke. This is the honest truth.
I think I'm going to spare you the rest of that. We'll take it offline. Yes. But it's good to hear your position on that. Let me follow that up by another thing that's always been a sort of interesting discussion for most people. So there's been the discussion of selling the Port Harcourt refinery or Kaduna refinery. As you know now, government is doing some work at the old Port Harcourt refinery. I understand that's about 60,000 barrels. There's a lot of work with Technomont, yeah? There's another work that's going on at the Kaduna refinery, which is another 110,000 barrels per day. They're thinking that that can come in next year. Quick question to you. What would you do? Would you keep these refineries or would you sell them if you were in the position to make this decision?
Okay. I think that even in the government's decision to refurbish the refineries, it has also been acknowledged that the government is a bad manager of those refineries.
Okay.
So the intention is once it is refurbished, they will get an international, well, it might be a national organization, but they will get a private sector company to run the refinery with clear benchmarks for profitability. So Nigeria will decide what they want to get out of it, and whoever it is that's capable of running on those terms will then come and run the refinery. So the government will not run those refineries. So that's good. That in its way, exactly, that in its way takes away the commercials around selling. Because the reason people wanted it sold was because we're convinced that government could not run it. The government itself has taken a decision to say, don't worry, once it is refurbished, a private sector-led company will come and run it. It will not be government. I think that that's a model that can work.
Thank you very much for that, Adi. Now, see, I've been following this refinery issue for a few weeks because, like you rightly said, it was the only thing that kind of trickled down to us as the masses. Do you see? And okay, so this week or just the week before, there was some discussion about the Dangote refinery, and now they're saying that Dangote will be starting in November, early November. They can't seem to get crude to Dangote refinery for some strange reason. And it looks like, in fact, it seems that the producers they're talking to are also having an argument that they want to be paid in dollars. On the second side, I'm also hearing that the Kaduna refinery, what government is trying to do is now to import crude from Venezuela because, again, they can't seem to guarantee the supply to these refineries. Is this correct? And if so, why do we have a supply issue in a country that produces so much? I understand, for example, for the first time, at least for the first time, we're able to go back to about 1.9 million barrels in October this year. We haven't done that. It's almost double of what we were doing at the beginning of the year. So why do we have these supply issues again for these refineries?
I think it's the same disconnect that has always existed. It's the reason why cooking gas, known as LPG, continues to be scarce because there is a disconnect between the process for refining or producing it and the infrastructure available. And you remember I said downstream is about the business of the logistics. Logistics is very infrastructure dependent. The infrastructures are available to move the products. So like you just said, we've ramped up production. So clearly the crude is available. The conversations are around the process of getting it from one location to where it is going to be refined or processed.
I see.
Now, with your Kaduna refinery, from day one, we have the product in one end of the country, the refinery is in another end of the country. Okay. It's probably not the most optimal in terms of supply chain or logistics, but there were other maybe necessary issues at stake to assure all Nigerians that they have a stake in this same crude.
Correct.
Yeah. And so the supply to that refinery has always been done via pipelines.
Yes.
The refinery has been inactive for such a long time. The pipelines have been vandalized, or they have just left, or because it's a long distance from wherever we're putting the crude in from to Kaduna refinery. So there are pumping stations that are supposed to boost the pressure as it drops along the line, and a few other things that have all either been vandalized or looted or whatever. So one of the things the government has done as part of this process is that they have also created a build, operate, and transfer model for those pipelines and the different pump stations and all of that, along with the depots for distributing refined products. As that infrastructure itself, government has also acknowledged that they don't have resources to resuscitate them. So what happened was they put them into 5 different lots, zoning them in clusters. Those clusters then tendered for interested parties to bid on. That tender has been concluded. Parties have been awarded the different lots, and the understanding of that process is that those parties first demonstrated that they had the funds available to invest, because our company was one of the consortiums that bidded on 2 of those lots. So I have a bit of information as to that exercise. So the companies that were successful in that process have now been awarded. So the expectation is that they will change the piping and all of those things. Now, that process itself, for a country that does not produce any of those things, from pumps to pipes to all of those things, everything has to be imported. So when people come and say, oh, in other countries, these things took 8 months, it will take us 8 months to order and have those orders ready before we even talk of shipping, then moving it to location and all of those things. So it will take a while to even get those things up and running. This is the reason why there are conversations around sourcing, because even if you do bring crude from Venezuela,
you still need to transport it.
It still has to be delivered. It still has to be delivered to Kaduna refinery. So it's one of those instances like we saw with the Obasanjo administration, where we focused on building power plants that were going to use gas.
Yes.
The infrastructure to deliver gas to the power plants was not
there.
So
I see. I see.
I think that in the short term, the quick wins are in Warri, they're in Port Harcourt, they are in Dangote because they are bodies of water. So even if pipelines are not running, we can get vessels very close to the refineries and transfer the products to them. Kaduna, while we might get ready, I'm not sure that the infrastructure to deliver products to Kaduna is going to happen in the short term. But there are plans underway to get it functional.
Oh, thank you for that. That is very clear. I've always struggled a bit to understand what was going on with the Kaduna one. So at least that gives me a lot of clarity with that. But for me, Ade, one thing that I took away also when I read this up is that it seems that if we're able to get all of these things working, you get the Dangote working, you get the old Port Harcourt working, and potentially it might take 2-3 years, you get the Kaduna working. Nigeria could then ultimately become a net exporter of refined product. Are you optimistic about this? What's your position?
Oh, yes. It's, again, what we have seen from when price has deregulated is that consumption has fallen drastically.
Yes.
So it goes to buttress the point that Nigeria did not consume as much as we thought we're consuming or subsidizing. So if all of those refineries come on stream, there's a very strong likelihood that as a country we would export refined products. I just realized that I missed out on a part of your last question as to crude producers asking for payments in USD.
Okay.
That is inevitable because all their costs is in USD. Apart from manpower that they pay in Naira, and some of their manpower, as you know, they are paid also in dollars because they are expatriates. So from day one, in fact, I was at a meeting where a very senior person in Dangote Industries was speaking, and he was saying Nigerians might be very disappointed at the end of this process because they are thinking when Dangote comes on stream, they're going to buy petrol again at 160 Naira or whatever. Yes, there will be savings in terms of maybe freight costs, what it would have cost us to transport and all of those logistics elements. There'll be savings there, but they were already of the opinion that crude will be secured in USD.
Oh.
That was their reality.
Oh.
So, because no Nigerian who is in upstream industry is looking to sell in Naira. It's not anybody's goal. When there is a dollar opportunity for the same crude, this is the reality. So this is where I then think that Nigeria in itself then needs to get creative. Rather than us subsidizing refined products that was imported, the crude, for most production facilities, Nigeria is a joint owner of it, either in PSCs or in JVs or whatever form. Nigeria can then take a position to say, yes, we will supply crude to you, Dangote, for local consumption at this price.
Yes. I will use some of my own share. I have 60% share. I will give you 10% of my share.
We will supply part of our own crude for local consumption. It cannot be exported. The one you, Dangote, want to export, you will buy from whoever it is that you're buying from at whatever rate they're selling, and you can export and sell at whatever price. But you see, of course, the problem though is once the price in Nigeria drops, we go back to the old story of Nigerians exporting refined products that have been subsidized by Nigerian governments. So whether we subsidize as production or as final products, it wouldn't matter. It will bleed into West African countries again. So so in that sense, we can keep this regime, whatever savings Nigerian government is making, it can come in form of palliatives for the worst hit Nigerians. Yeah. I know this government has talked a lot about collecting data and the rest, and that differential, that savings can go towards whatever funding or whatever we're giving to those that are worst hit by the economy and this policy changes. But I don't think we should go back to the point where we're selling petrol less than
what it's worth.
I don't think it makes sense for us as a country.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to take you on one last question in this petroleum distribution thing, and it's something that you are fairly familiar with. I understand that NNPC recently acquired 380 outlets from OVH, or the old Oando. You are one of the marketing strategy people back in the day. Is this a good decision by NNPC, and how is that going to impact our people?
So I saw a data. So the major marketers in Nigeria have an association, and they maintain a data for major marketers. Now, there are independent marketers who are not part of that data coalition that they currently have. And there are some heavy weightlifters amongst the independents. But for the majors, which is Total, AP, that's Adeola Petroleum.
Yes.
Well, old AP became Adeola Petroleum, so AP is still very relevant to them. What used to be Mobile Downstream, that is now 11 PLC, MRS. In that group, I saw a data that shows that in 2023 year-to-date end of October, I believe, NNPC Limited has sold 67% of PMS in Nigeria to date.
Wow. How?
So it then makes sense that NNPC has those retail outlets for very simple reasons. NNPC remains the only importer of PMS in Nigeria, even though it's been deregulated. Others have not participated, mainly because there's no dollar available. That's a big problem at the moment. There's no dollar available. But secondly, the price at which NNPC is selling the PMS, others cannot land PMS at that price.
Okay.
So others are unable to land their PMS.
Are you suggesting to us that there's still some level of subsidy?
I haven't said that. All I've just said that others cannot land PMS at the rate which NNPC is selling. So if you then imagine that NNPC did not have those outlets, NNPC would then have had to sell its products to the other marketers, who would then have come to the market and sold it at a higher price than NNPC is selling. Okay. So as a strategy to still deliver relatively cheap PMS to the market, NNPC needed to own those outlets. It's a very important part of that strategy for them to, in some ways, to control pricing without controlling it. Because as long as there's an NNPC station next to you that can sell product at a certain price, you're not likely to go to a station that is selling at 10, 20 naira more.
I see.
And so they have forced the others also in terms of their pricing. So as a mechanism for price control, I think it's a fantastic strategy from the NPC.
Oh, fantastic. You're absolutely right. I mean, I'd follow the trends around the world. You can see the same Aramco, Saudi Aramco, PDVSA, everybody's going down this strategy as well. So I think it's a good one, particularly because they have not only in Nigeria, but also in Togo and places like that. You guys did that when you were with Oando anyway.
That's
so
right.
That's right. Okay. So let me move away now from the petroleum, from the gasoline PMS side. You mentioned something earlier, which is of interest to me, which is the cooking gas. In fact, I was checking cooking gas prices, and I see that now they're between 10,000 to 12,000 for 12.5 kg. It's a bit steep for people, isn't it? So my question is, and the trend seems to have been rising. The last time I was in Lagos, it was 3,000, and then it's just been going on steadily until it's now 12,500. So first things first, what is driving this price rise, and how can
the exchange rates? The exchange rates. At the end of the day, LPG is still a dollar business. So it lands as exchange rate changes, the value changes. It's that simple.
Well, Ade, why can't we produce LPG in Nigeria? We do have
LPG. In fact, as part of the mandate for NLNG,
correct,
they're meant to provide a bit of LPG for local consumption.
Okay.
But again, we come back to some of the issues. I did mention that the downstream business is infrastructure dependent.
Okay.
So typically what happens is that even when your NLNG makes the LPG available, you have the vessels that load them. These vessels then berths, but because there's a shortage of onshore storage to put products in, then when you put it in, until what is in those tanks are evacuated to inland storages of different selling whatever, those guys cannot offload the balance of so every shipment of LPG that is received into the country, there is an inbuilt demurrage cost because the vessel owners know that they're going to be offshore Nigeria with product tied down for a certain number of days. So they just build that into the cost ab initio. So and then of course that cost is in dollars. The vessel itself is chartered in. So even if Nigeria said our LPG was selling at naira, there's still a dollar element. Yes, it might not be as bad as it is now, but there's still a dollar element to infrastructure bits in terms of moving it from production to inland storage. And for the guys who have invested in those storages, because in last year's NIPCO and a few other people have also added additional storage just to ease some of this infrastructure challenge. But we're a country that's constantly pushed for people to move from wood and charcoal and all of those things to gas. So the demand for gas is growing.
It's growing.
I'm not sure that infrastructure is scaling up as quickly as, and for very good reasons. It's expensive to do.
It is.
And the storage guys, for instance, charge in naira. Every time naira loses value, they're further away from recovering their costs because those tanks are built in dollars. Every piece of steel that is used, every pump was imported in dollars. So they're further away from recovering costs.
I'm building the project I'm working on now. We're building a storage facility similar to the one you're talking about in the Middle East, somewhere in the Middle East. It's costing us upwards of $1 billion to do that.
Exactly.
It's just the reality of it. But I think Nigeria also has to have a strategic, a long-term plan, because this problem is not going to go away. We need to have
this problem has been around for more than 30 years.
Yeah, but anyway, okay.
It's been around for a long time.
Okay. Now, you mentioned about the NLNG. In fact, because in answering that question, you mentioned that part of the mandate of the NLNG is to provide LPG or cooking gas to our people. Okay. Now, one thing I've always said to people around the world is that the NLNG, for me, is one of the best run LNG projects in the world. It's totally world-class. But I noticed, though, I mean, recently, obviously, President Tinubu took some money from the NLNG, our share from the NLNG, 6.7 billion to do the dollar stabilization that we're doing now. So it's something that has really worked for Nigeria. But what I noticed is that for the first time in a long time, they are declaring force majeure. They declared force majeure in August, and now we're in the beginning of November. You know, should we be worried? Should we be worried about this great company that we have run very well for such a long time? Or is this just a temporary issue?
I think it's temporary. Like you said, it's probably again, I don't want to offend people, several people in Nigeria that might hear me mention this, but it's probably the best run business in Nigeria,
yeah,
of its size.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's amazing that even Nigeria waited till now to do Train 7.
Absolutely.
Because it's such a successful model that you would have thought, let's double it, let's triple it, let's try and do more of this same thing. My take is that if NLNG is declaring a force majeure, it's because it is necessary. They have tried everything else. And it's, again, that force majeure, as you know, they have long-term contracts. Yeah. They are obligated to fulfill those contracts unless there's a force majeure. So that force majeure in a lot of ways is also to protect themselves because of the contracts that they have. They're working assiduously to sort the issues behind the scenes, and we're very hopeful that will go away.
Okay, so let me ask you my last question. Honestly, I've thoroughly enjoyed discussing these things with you. Because I always ask this question to you and to all our other guys that we talk about, said, if you were oil minister in Nigeria today, what advice can you give us on how to make things better?
I'm going to lead with a caveat because I think that Nigerians overestimate the role of a minister, the office of a minister.
I agree.
Is probably the most celebrated office without as much power as people celebrate it to be. I remember that the former Lagos State Governor, Governor Babatunde Raji Fashola, His Excellency, was exceptional as a governor in Lagos, at least when it seemed to have.
Absolutely.
And so people then expected the same thing at the federal level. And I always reminded people that as governor, you're chief executive. Absolutely. You decide what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, how it needs to happen, allocation of resources and the rest. As minister, you are a gopher. In the essence that you report to FEC, you report to National Assembly, you report to the presidency. You have so many bosses that can alter the direction of things despite your best efforts. And so that for me is a very important caveat when people talk about ministers, because you can have all the, I remember when Excellence Babashola, Raji Fashola was minister for power, housing and
works.
I remember him talking about the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway and why you are taking that long. Because every year he will present a budget to finish the road and he will be told, this is all we can allocate to you. In fact, I remember a Senate president, after he left office, celebrating how he frustrated the party's effort to finish Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. And it's that easy for the National Assembly to do. Just refuse to appropriate funds to the project and it's done. So, as the minister for oil in Nigeria, and in fact, it's now new because again, nonetheless, I'm sure we have split gas from oil and all of that.
Yes, we have, yes.
The minister for oil, as compared to almost every other minister, is the Ministry of Policy Development, as I like to call it. You control nothing, you own nothing. Everything is privately owned. You're dealing with private owners that have muscle. You're dealing with Exxon, you're dealing with Total Energies. These are people who have global strength. So you can't even bugger them, as we say in local parlance. You're dealing with people who own all the leverage because you need them to invest, you need them to. So that office at its best is
Okay, let me take it out there. I think I've run out of time, but it's great to speak with you as always. Fantastic.
Adekunle, my pleasure is mine as usual.
Yeah.
I look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Certainly look forward to it. It's good to speak with you again. Thank you and have a good evening.
All right. Bye.